The paper was not just a contract, it was a chain. Cashin scrawled his name at the bottom with a flick of his wrist, the ink as dark and final as his mood. He was a man who built an empire on fear, a king in a world of shadows. To secure his throne, his advisors said he needed a queen from an old, respected family. It was just business. A merger. He imagined the woman on the other side of this deal would be just like the others he knew, sharp, experienced, and understanding the cold rules of their world. He expected a partner in pretense, not a person. The day she arrived, the air in his grand house changed. Elodie did not stride in. She was ushered, a silent ghost in a simple white dress. Cashin watched from his study window, his eyes narrowing. She was smaller than he had pictured, her shoulders slightly hunched as if trying to disappear into herself. Her hair, the color of dark honey, fell in soft waves, hiding her profile. There was no boldness, only a quiet stillness that put his senses on alert. This was not what he had paid for. Their first meeting was in the grand hall. His men stood like statues along the walls, their presence meant to intimidate. Cashin stood in the center, a mountain of tailored black silk and simmering power. When Elodie was brought before him, she kept her eyes fixed on the floor. Annoyance, sharp and hot, flared within him. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice low but cutting through the silence like a whip. She flinched, a tiny, almost invisible movement, before slowly lifting her gaze. Her eyes were the color of a stormy sea, and in their depths he saw not calculation, but pure, unguarded fear. It was so genuine, so out of place, that it threw him. This was no season player. This was a scared girl. The wedding was a spectacle of lies. The church was filled with people who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. Cashin played his part perfectly, the powerful, slightly bored groom. But when he took Elodie's hand to slide the ring onto her finger, he felt it. A fine, constant tremor ran through her, a vibration of pure terror. Her skin was ice-cold despite the warm room. She kept her eyes downcast, her long lashes casting shadows on her pale cheeks. She recited her vows in a whisper so faint he had to lean in to hear, her breath catching on the words, "forever." He felt a strange, unwelcome twist in his chest. This was wrong. This delicate, trembling creature did not belong in his harsh world. The reception was a blur of noise and false congratulations. Elodie stood by his side, a beautiful, silent statue. She didn't eat, she barely sipped her wine. Cashin found his attention constantly drifting back to her, his initial annoyance slowly being replaced by a prickling sense of confusion. Who was this girl? Why was she so afraid? Finally, the long, painful day was over. The last of the guests were gone, and the heavy doors of his private wing closed behind them with a soft, final click. They were alone. The air in the spacious sitting room was thick and still. Elodie stood frozen in the center of the ornate rug, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff. Cashin poured himself a drink, the amber liquid swirling in the crystal glass. He studied her over the rim. This was the moment. This was what the contract was for. This was the transaction to be completed. "This is how it will be," he said, his tone flat and businesslike. He set his glass down with a sharp click. "You are my wife in name. Now you will be my wife in truth. It is part of our agreement." He moved toward her, not with passion, but with purpose. He was a man used to taking what was his. As he got closer, the fear in her eyes didn't just linger, it exploded. A silent plea screamed from her whole being. She took a stumbling step back, hitting the edge of a sofa, her breath coming in quick, shallow pants. "Please," she whispered, the word a broken sound. "Please what?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. He stopped directly in front of her, his large frame blocking out the light from the lamp. He reached out, not to hurt her, but to touch her arm, to pull her closer and get this over with. The moment his fingers made contact with her bare skin, she gasped and squeezed her eyes shut, as if bracing for a blow. A single tear escaped, tracing a glistening path down her cheek. And in that moment, Cashin saw everything. He saw the way she trembled at his simple touch. He saw the raw, untouched innocence in her panicked expression. He saw the way she held herself, a fortress that had never been breached. The pieces clicked into place with the force of a physical blow. Her family. They were old-fashioned, fiercely protective of their reputation. Her quiet nature. Her sheer, unacting terror. It wasn't that she didn't want this, it was that she had no idea what this was. She had never been with a man before. The realization struck Cashin like a bucket of ice water. He had dealt with liars and thieves, with men who would kill for a price. He knew every trick, every deception. But this raw, honest vulnerability was a language he didn't speak. He had prepared for a battle of wits, not for the utter surrender of an innocent. He thought he was acquiring a used, knowing asset, but he had been given a sealed, priceless treasure. His hand, still on her arm, gentled its hold. The hard set of his jaw softened. The cold, businesslike fury that had driven him all day evaporated, leaving behind a shocking and unfamiliar feeling, protectiveness. This changed everything. To proceed would not be claiming a right, it would be a destruction. It would be breaking something beautiful and rare, just because he could. He looked down at her tightly shut eyes and tear-streaked face, and made a decision that sent a tremor through his own soul. He slowly, carefully, dropped his hand from her arm. Elodie flinched at the movement, waiting for the assault. When it didn't come, she cautiously cracked open her eyes. She found him simply staring at her, his expression unreadable, a storm of new thoughts raging behind his dark eyes. Without a word, Cashin took a deliberate step back, putting a safe, respectful distance between them. The air crackled with the tension of his unexpected retreat. He turned and walked to the door of the bedroom, pausing with his hand on the frame. He didn't look back at her when he spoke, his voice rough with an emotion he himself didn't understand. "Sleep," he said, the single word a command, but also a promise. "The room is yours. I will not trouble you tonight." Then he was gone, pulling the door shut behind him, leaving Elodie alone in the vast, silent room, more confused and shocked than she had been all day. The chain of the contract had just been broken, and neither of them knew what would happen next. The silence that followed Cashin's retreat was louder than any shout. Elodie stood frozen in the center of the room, her body still braced for a pain that never came. The click of the door was a sound that seemed to split her world in two. One moment, she had been facing a terrifying, inevitable fate. The next, she was alone, wrapped in a bewildering and fragile safety. She didn't move for a long time, listening to the frantic hammering of her own heart slowly settle into a confused, steady rhythm. He was gone. The beast had looked at its prey and chosen to walk away. She slid to the floor, the thick rug soft beneath her, and buried her face in her hands, not crying in sorrow, but trembling with the shock of a reprieve she never dared to hope for. Cashin, on the other side of the door, leaned his head against the cool wood, his own breath a ragged thing in his throat. His study, where he would now spend the night, felt alien and cold. The image of her, so small and terrified, was burned onto the back of his eyelids. He, a man who commanded armies of shadows, had been undone by a single tear. The contract on his desk, which had seemed so clear and logical, now felt like a vile, ugly thing. He had not married a partner, he had acquired a sacrifice. The thought sickened him. For the first time in his adult life, Cashin felt the sharp, uncomfortable sting of shame. The next morning dawned bright, its cheerfulness an insult to the turmoil inside the house. Elodie, who had slept little, dressed carefully, steeling herself for the new day. Would he be angry? Would he demand what he had foregone the night before? She crept out of the room, her steps hesitant. She found him not at the grand dining table, but at a small table on the sunlit terrace overlooking the gardens. He stood as she approached, a gesture of formality that felt strangely old-fashioned. "Good morning," he said, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. It wasn't the soft voice of a gentle man, but the controlled tone of a man trying very hard to be one. "Good morning," she whispered back, her eyes fixed on the floral pattern of the tablecloth. He pulled out her chair for her. The simple, gentlemanly act shocked her more than his anger would have. They ate in a silence that was heavy, but not hostile. He didn't press her. He didn't demand. He simply let her be. After breakfast, instead of leaving for his work, He surprised her again. "The gardens are extensive," he stated, not looking at her. "It is easy to get lost. I could show you the way to the rose garden if you wish." It wasn't a command. It was an offer. A question. Elodie, her curiosity now piqued by this new, puzzling version of her husband, gave a small, hesitant nod. That walk was the first thread. He walked slowly, matching his long strides to her smaller steps. He didn't touch her. He simply pointed out things. A rare white peacock that strutted near a fountain, the history of a particular ancient statue. He spoke about the land, the business of the estate, things that were safe and solid. And then, as they stood surrounded by the dizzying scent of blooming roses, he asked his first real question. "Why did you agree to this, Elodie?" He said her name. Not wife. Not you. Her name. It sounded like a confession on his lips. She wrapped her arms around herself, watching a bumblebee drone lazily from one flower to the next. The truth felt too heavy to say aloud. But his silence was patient, a space for her to fill if she chose. And something in her, a tiny, frozen part, began to thaw. "My father," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "He is a good man, but not a careful one. He made promises to dangerous people. He owed a great deal of money. More than we could ever pay." She took a shaky breath. "Your men came. They offered a solution. A marriage. They said it would clear all the debts, that it would protect my younger brother and sister. They said it was an honor." She finally risked a glance at him. "What choice did I have?" Cashin watched her, seeing not just a girl, but a daughter, a sister. A person with a history, with people she loved enough to sacrifice her entire life for. He saw the weight of that sacrifice in the weary slope of her shoulders. He had thought her family had sold her for influence. Instead, they had been saved by her courage. The shame he felt the night before deepened, twisting into something else, a profound, aching respect. "You have a brother and sister?" he asked, his voice gentler. And so, the wall began to crumble. She told him about her brother's dream of being a painter, her sister's love for silly, romantic novels. She spoke of a home that was loud and messy and full of love, a world away from the cold, perfect silence of his mansion. Day bled into day. Their walks became a ritual. The conversations slowly shifted from her life to his. He didn't tell her the dark things, the things that happened in the shadows. But he told her about being a young boy, thrust into a position of power he never asked for. He spoke of the loneliness of command, of never knowing who to trust. He had built walls around himself so high, he'd forgotten what it was like to have someone on the other side. A real friendship was growing in the space between them, tender and green as a spring shoot. He made her laugh, a real, genuine laugh, one day by telling a funny story about the white peacock chasing one of his sternest guards. The sound was so bright and unexpected that it seemed to startle them both. Cashin found he would do almost anything to hear it again. The shift from friendship to something more was as natural as a sunrise. It began with a touch. They were in the library, and he reached to take a heavy book from her hands. His fingers brushed against hers. This time, she did not flinch. She did not pull away. A simple touch, but it sent a current through them both, a silent acknowledgement of the new world they were building. That night, he did not leave her at her door. He paused, his hand resting on the frame, much like he had on their wedding night. But this time, everything was different. "Elodie," he said, her name a question. She looked up at him, her stormy sea eyes clear and steady. The fear was gone. In its place was a nervous anticipation, a trust that had been earned day by day, word by word. She gave a small, certain nod. He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. This time, there was no cold purpose, no sense of a transaction. He stood before her and slowly, giving her every chance to refuse, lifted his hand to her cheek. His touch was warm, his thumb stroking her skin with a reverence that made her heart ache. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his dark eyes searching hers. "And I will. Always." "Don't stop," she breathed back. What followed was a slow, gentle discovery. It was not the claiming of a right, but the sharing of a gift. He was endlessly patient, his hands and lips learning her, not taking but asking. Every new touch was a question, and every soft sigh from her was an answer. He worshipped her with his patience, making sure she felt not just safe, but cherished. The world outside, the business, the danger, all of it faded into a distant hum. For Elodie, the fear was replaced by a warmth that spread from her core, a feeling of being truly seen, not as a bargaining chip, but as a woman. For Cashin, the cold fortress around his heart finally crumbled, not under an assault, but under the gentle, persistent weight of a love he never knew he needed. Later, as she lay curled against his side, her head on his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart, she knew. This was not a contract. This was a beginning. He held her close, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare arm, and he knew it too. The shocking twist of their first night had not been a setback. It had been the key that unlocked both their hearts, leading them here, to this quiet intimacy, to this promise of a forever that was chosen, not just sworn. The first thing Elodie felt was warmth. A solid, steady warmth against her back and the heavy, comforting weight of an arm draped possessively over her waist. Sunlight, soft and golden with the early hour, filtered through the elegant curtains, painting stripes of light across the rumpled silk sheets. She blinked slowly, the memories of the night before washing over her not in a shocking wave, but in a gentle, warm tide. There was no regret, no lingering fear. Only a profound, quiet sense of rightness. She started to shift, and the arm around her tightened instinctively, pulling her closer. Cashin was still asleep, his face relaxed in slumber, the harsh lines of command and suspicion smoothed away. In sleep he looked younger, vulnerable. She watched the steady rise and fall of his chest, feeling the rhythm against her back. This was the most feared man in the city, and he was holding her as if she were the most precious thing he had ever possessed. As if sensing her wakefulness, his breathing changed. His eyes fluttered open, and for a single, heart-stopping moment, Elodie wondered if the night had been a dream. Would the cold, distant man return? Would he retreat behind his walls? His dark eyes focused on her, still soft with sleep. Then, a slow, genuine smile touched his lips, a sight so rare and beautiful it made her breath catch. It wasn't a smirk or a gesture of triumph. It was a smile of pure, unguarded happiness. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep, a low, intimate rumble that vibrated through her. "Good morning," she whispered back, her own lips curving in response. He didn't say anything else for a long moment. He simply looked at her, his gaze tracing the lines of her face as if memorizing them. His hand, which had been resting on her waist, moved, his fingers splaying across her stomach, his touch a brand of ownership that was no longer about a contract, but about devotion. "The deal is over," he said, his voice low and certain, filling the sunlit room. "It is null and void. From this moment, there is no contract. There is only us." Elodie turned in his arms to face him fully, her stormy sea eyes meeting his dark, intense gaze. "There is only you," she repeated, the words a vow. "Elodie," he began, his tone shifting, becoming more serious. "I have spent my life building an empire on threats and fear. I thought strength was in never showing weakness, in never caring for anyone enough for them to become a target. But you—" He brushed a stray strand of honey-colored hair from her cheek. "You have become my only strength. You are more important to me than any business, any deal, any power. I promise you, with everything that I am, that I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this. I will protect you, I will cherish you. This marriage, our marriage, is real. It is from my heart." Tears welled in Elodie's eyes, but they were not tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of overwhelming joy, of a feeling of home she had never known she was searching for. She reached up, her hand cupping his rough cheek, feeling the faint stubble beneath her palm. "My heart was a locked room," she said softly. "I thought I was giving you the key to save my family. I didn't know you would use it not to take, but to stay. You walked into that room and you filled it with light." She leaned forward, until their foreheads were touching, their breath mingling. "My heart is yours, Cashin. It is yours forever. That first night I was so scared. I thought it was the end of everything I knew. But it was just the beginning of us. The scary twist of their wedding night, the moment he had seen her terror and stepped back, had not been a failure. It had been the first, crucial crack in his armor, the moment a king had chosen mercy over power. It had allowed Cashin to discover that beneath the layers of a ruthless mafia boss, there was a man capable of profound kindness and love. And for Elodie, it had been the trial by fire that revealed her own incredible strength. The strength to face her fears, to trust again, and to claim a happiness she never thought she deserved. Their life together was not a simple fairy tale. The shadows of his world still lingered at the edges. There were still dangerous men and difficult decisions. But now they faced them together. Elodie was no longer a scared girl in a gilded cage. She was his partner, his confidant, the calm at the center of his storm. Her gentle strength became his secret weapon, her honest perspective a guide he learned to trust implicitly. He brought her brother to the estate, providing him with a master artist to study under. He ensured her sister had the finest education, her future secure and bright. He didn't just protect Elodie, he loved the people she loved, weaving the family she missed into the fabric of their new life. Years later, standing on the same terrace where they had taken their first tentative walk together, Cashin would hold her from behind, his arms wrapped around her as they watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The white peacock, now old and dignified, still strutted near the fountain. It all started with a contract. He would whisper into her hair, his voice filled with a wonder that never faded. Elodie would lean back into his embrace, a contented smile on her face. "No," she would correct him gently, placing her hand over his, where it rested against her heart. It all started when a powerful man chose to be a good one. It started with you. Their story was a testament to the fact that the most powerful bonds are not forged in blood or business, but in choice, in patience, and in the courageous decision to be vulnerable with the one you love. It was a promise made not on paper, but in the quiet of a bedroom and the warmth of a shared sunrise. A promise of forever, kept every single day. We hope you were swept away by Cashin and Elodie's journey from a cold contract to a burning, forever love. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by hitting that subscribe button and ringing the notification bell so you never miss one of our romantic tales. We love hearing from you. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what you thought about the story. Were you shocked when Cashin walked away on their wedding night? Did you cheer when they finally found their happy beginning? Share your thoughts down below. We read every single one. Thank you for watching, and we can't wait to share the next epic romance with you.
I don't talk about that night. Not to anyone. Not even to myself. But sometimes, when everything's quiet enough, I can still hear the sound. The way glass exploded against the floor. The way my own name tore out of my throat. The way the world ended without warning. I remember the fire first. Not literal fire. Just that kind that burns everything you thought was safe. I was in the kitchen, reheating leftover pasta for Emma. She was 5. She sat on the counter, swinging her legs, humming some cartoon song under her breath. And for one stupid second, I thought I'd finally built something stable, a small, fragile life that belonged only to us. Then the door splintered. I didn't even scream. I just grabbed Emma and ran through the back hallway. I'd been expecting something like that, though I'd never admit it before. You don't live years with a man like Tyler without learning what kind of enemies he leaves behind. He'd left us months ago. Or maybe I'd left him. Depends who you ask. The gunshot came before the words. One sharp crack, then silence so deep I could hear my pulse trying to climb out of my body. Emma was crying against my shoulder. My only thought was, keep her quiet. Keep her breathing. I don't remember how I got outside. Bare feet on the cold ground. My car keys in my shaking hand. I drove like a ghost, not seeing anything, just running on instinct. We ended up miles away in some nowhere stretch between the city and the desert. The motel sign flickered. Vacancy. Always vacancy. That's where he found me. It wasn't dramatic. I wasn't running through a storm or drenched in tears. I was sitting on the edge of the motel bed, holding Emma while she slept, staring at the wall like it could give me an answer. The door knocked once, slow, controlled. When I opened it, he was standing there in a black shirt, sleeves rolled up, top button undone like he wasn't visiting a woman on the edge of collapse. "Lena," he said, like he already knew my name. "You shouldn't be here." His voice didn't ask, it decided. Calm, deep, measured. I hated how my body reacted to it. I tried to close the door. "Who are you?" He pushed it open easily. Didn't force, just overpowered with quiet confidence. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room, landing on Emma's sleeping figure. "I'm not here to hurt you. If I wanted to, you wouldn't have made it this far." The words chilled me more than the night air. "Then why are you here?" He looked at me like I should already know. Tyler owed me, a lot, and now he's dead. Something inside me cracked. I didn't want to believe it. "You're lying. I don't lie." "Not when it matters." I sank onto the bed. The world felt tilted. My husband, no, my ex, was dead. And now this man stood in front of me like he owned the space where my future used to be. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. He crouched, his eyes level with mine. They were dark, steady, terrifyingly calm. "I want you to live. But you can't do that here." He said his name then, Luca Moretti. I'd heard it before in whispers. Tyler used to say that name with the kind of fear men reserve for God or death. The one who cleaned up messes, who made debts disappear, if you were willing to pay in blood or loyalty. And now he was offering me safety. I told him no. I told him to leave. He didn't. Instead, he stepped closer. "Lena, you have nowhere to go. They'll come for you next. And the girl. You think they'll stop with Tyler?" I hated that he was right. I packed our things without another word. He stood by the door the whole time, silent, watching. When I tried to wake Emma, she smiled at him sleepily. "Are you Mommy's friend?" she asked. He looked at her for a long second. Something in his expression softened, barely. "Something like that. That's how it started. Not with love. With survival." We drove through the night. I didn't ask where. He didn't explain. Emma slept across the back seat, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I sat beside a man whose world smelled like danger and cologne and quiet control. At sunrise, we reached the house. No, mansion. Too quiet, too perfect. The kind of place that had seen more secrets than guests. He led me inside. "You'll stay here," he said simply. "I don't even know you," I said. "You think I'll just—" He cut me off with a look that made my throat go dry. "You don't have a choice right now," I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I was too tired, too aware of Emma's tiny hand gripping mine. He showed us a room, bigger than our entire apartment used to be. "You'll be safe here," he said again, softer this time. "Why?" I asked. "Why help me?" He leaned against the doorframe, eyes unreadable. "Because Tyler died owing me a debt. And maybe because I don't like seeing something break that didn't deserve it." That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence was too loud. Emma slept beside me, her small breath steady and innocent. I stared at the ceiling, wondering what kind of man offered protection like this, wondering what it would cost me. When I finally went downstairs for water, I found him in the study. Shirt still unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled, a drink untouched in his hand. He looked up as I entered. "Couldn't sleep?" I shook my head. "Neither could you." His mouth curved slightly. "Sleep doesn't come easy when you've built a life out of ghosts." I didn't know what that meant, but I felt it. I should have walked away then. But something about his calm made me stay. We sat in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that feels like confession. Finally, he spoke again. "You think I'm dangerous, aren't you?" He didn't answer, just stared into his glass. Danger's relative. Sometimes it's the only thing that keeps worse things away. I wanted to believe him. God help me, I did. Before I went back upstairs, he said one last thing. "Lena, whatever you hear about me, whatever you think you know, remember this. I keep my promises." I looked at him, trying to understand what kind of promise that could be. "What promise?" His eyes locked on mine. "That you'll never lose everything again. Not while I'm alive." The words felt like both a warning and a vow. When I crawled back into bed beside Emma, My heart wouldn't stop racing. I told myself it was fear. It wasn't. It was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Something more dangerous than any threat outside that house. By morning, I already knew the truth I didn't want to say out loud. I didn't trust him. But part of me already belonged to him. She lies awake, realizing that survival has a new name now, Luca Moretti, and she can't decide if he's her savior or the next man who'll destroy her. It's strange how quickly survival can start to look like comfort. 1 week in Luca's house felt like a lifetime. Every morning began the same way. The sun spilling across polished marble, the faint scent of espresso drifting from the kitchen, and his voice somewhere in the distance, low and certain, directing a world I didn't understand. He never explained what he did, and I never asked, but I saw enough. The men who came and went, the way they waited before entering his office, the silence that followed once they did. His world ran on control. Mine was running on borrowed peace. Emma was adjusting faster than I was. Luca had turned one of the guest rooms into a makeshift playroom for her. It was too much, too perfect. Dolls, art supplies, a tiny bookshelf. Sometimes I'd find him standing in the doorway, watching her paint. Never smiling, but his eyes softened just slightly, as if something about her reminded him that not everything he touched had to bleed. I didn't understand him. He was danger wrapped in calm, a contradiction that made my chest tighten whenever he entered the room. One evening I found him sitting outside on the terrace, his shirt half unbuttoned, the evening light cutting across his jaw. He looked unreal, like something carved from the quiet after a storm. "You watch people the way some people pray," he said without turning. I froze. "What?" His mouth twitched. "You look at them like you're waiting for them to save you, or damn you." I hated how he saw through me. "And which one are you?" He took a slow sip of his drink. "Depends on the day." That became our rhythm. Questions without answers. Conversations that felt like dances too close to a fire. Still, I couldn't ignore the unease that followed me through those halls. The walls whispered. The men downstairs always looked twice when I passed. I told myself I was safe, but deep down, I knew safety wasn't the same as freedom. One afternoon, I overheard him on the phone. His tone was sharp, colder than I'd ever heard. "No, she and the girl stay under my protection. Anyone who touches them answers to me." That should have comforted me. It didn't. It sounded like ownership. When he hung up, I was standing at the edge of the hall. "Who are you talking about?" I asked, even though I already knew. His expression didn't change. "You shouldn't eavesdrop, Lena." "Then don't keep secrets in my house." He stepped closer. "Your house?" The way he said it, low, dangerous, made something in me tremble. I swallowed hard. "You said we were safe here. You didn't say we were prisoners." He studied me for a long moment, then looked past me, as if something heavier than words sat on his tongue. "You're not my prisoner. You're alive because I decided you should be. Don't confuse that with captivity." His words should have made me hate him. Instead, they made me feel something I couldn't name. Something that lived in the space between fury and fascination. That night I found a letter slipped under my door. No name. Just a few words scrawled in rough ink. "He's the reason Tyler's dead." Run before you can't. I didn't sleep. By morning I was pacing. My thoughts were shards. Disbelief, anger, confusion. When I finally confronted him, he was sitting in his office, reading over a file. He looked up the moment I entered. "You killed him," I said, the words barely holding steady. His eyes didn't flinch. "Where did you hear that?" "Does it matter?" He leaned back in his chair, silent for a long time. Then, "Yes, because whoever left that note wants you to believe half a story." "Then tell me the whole one." He stood. "Tyler was stealing from me, from my business. He thought he could disappear, take what wasn't his, and hide behind your name. I warned him to stop. He didn't. So you had him killed?" "No," he said quietly. "But I didn't stop the man who did." The air left my lungs. He came around the desk, stopping inches away. "I didn't touch him, Lena. But if I had, I'd still sleep fine at night. He put you and that little girl in danger." I wanted to scream, to hit him, to tear at the truth until it made sense. But when I looked at him, calm, unflinching, sincere in his darkness, I felt something worse than hate. I felt understanding. "You expect me to forgive you?" I whispered. "No, I expect you to survive, and I'm the only one who can make sure you do." He reached out, his hand hovering near my face, but he didn't touch me. I could feel the warmth anyway, the restraint, the ache. For the first time, I realized that he wasn't trying to own me. He was trying not to ruin me. I left before he could see me cry. That night, I packed a small bag. I told myself I'd take Emma and run before dawn. But when I opened the door, one of his men was already there, waiting. "Mr. Moretti says it's not safe tonight," he said. Of course, he always knew. I closed the door and sat on the bed, shaking. Emma stirred beside me, murmuring in her sleep. Her hand reached for mine. That small gesture broke me open. I couldn't risk her life again. The next morning, I went to him. "I'll stay," I said. "But only for her." He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just nodded once. "That's enough for now." Days turned into weeks. The tension between us was constant, quiet, simmering, electric. Sometimes he'd walk past me in the hallway, his hand brushing mine, and my body would remember that I was still alive. One night I found him outside again. The air was cool, the moon sharp above us. He looked tired, more human than I'd ever seen him. "Why do you care?" I asked softly. "You could have left me to die." He didn't look at me. "Because you looked at me like I was still worth saving. Nobody's done that in years." The honesty in his voice hit like a punch. We stood there in silence. Then, without thinking, I reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. His fingers closed around mine, slow, deliberate. It should have been wrong. It felt inevitable. When he finally kissed me, it wasn't soft. It was raw, desperate, like two people clinging to the last thing they shouldn't want. I broke away first, my heart racing. "I can't do this," I whispered. "You already are," he said, breathless. That night changed everything. After that, every glance, every word carried something unsaid. But peace doesn't last in houses built on lies. A week later, the attack came. I woke to the sound of gunfire. Shattered glass, shouts from downstairs. Emma screamed. I grabbed her, pulled her under the bed. My pulse was thunder. The door burst open. Luca stormed in, gun in hand, eyes wild. "Stay down," he shouted. He fired twice before I even saw who he was aiming at. One man dropped. Another fled. When the noise stopped, the silence was deafening. He turned to me, chest heaving. Blood on his arm, not his. "You're safe," he said, voice shaking for the first time. I crawled out, trembling. What happened? He didn't answer. He just looked at Emma, then at me. Someone sold us out. I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Guilt. "Who?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Someone I trusted." The next day, the mansion was empty. His men gone. His calls unanswered. He told me to pack again. "We can't stay here." I wanted to demand the truth. But the way he looked at me, raw, stripped of all the armor he usually wore, stopped me. He touched my face lightly. "If anything happens to me, take her and run. Don't look back." That was the moment I knew. Whatever bound us now went deeper than survival. But when he walked out that door, something in my chest whispered that I might never see him again. She watches him disappear into the night, realizing she's fallen for the man who might have destroyed her past, and now holds her future in his hands. "3 months. That's how long it had been since Luca walked out that night. Since the sound of his car faded down the road and the house became too quiet to breathe in. He said he'd come back. He said he'd fix it. I stopped believing men who said things like that a long time ago, but I still waited. Every morning I'd wake before Emma, sit by the kitchen window and watch the horizon. The house had been stripped of its life. The guards gone, the staff dismissed. Only me, Emma, and the ghosts he left behind. I didn't know where he'd gone, but I knew why. The attack hadn't been random. It had been a message. Someone from his world wanted him erased, and me with him. I spent weeks pretending I wasn't afraid, pretending I wasn't replaying every moment we'd shared, every word he hadn't said. I kept Emma close. I cooked simple meals. I started teaching her to write her name. I made life small again, manageable, quiet. And then one afternoon, a black car pulled up outside the gate. My heart stopped. I ran to the door, ready to grab Emma and run again if I had to. The driver stepped out first. an unfamiliar man in a gray suit. Then the back door opened. It was him. Luca looked different, thinner. A faint scar ran across his cheek, just below his eye. His shirt was the same, black top button undone, but he carried something heavier in his gaze. Something broken. I didn't move. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, like he wasn't sure I'd let him cross the threshold. Lena. I wanted to say everything and nothing all at once. Instead, I said the first thing that came to my lips. You're bleeding. He glanced down, as if noticing it for the first time. It's nothing. It never is with you, I said quietly. He looked around the house, then back at me. You stayed. I didn't have a choice. He nodded once. Neither did I. We stood there in silence, the air between us thick with unfinished sentences. Then Emma's voice broke through it. Luca! She ran straight into him, wrapping her arms around his waist. He froze for a second before bending down, his hand trembling as he touched her hair. Hey, little one, she smiled up at him. You came back. His voice softened in a way I'd never heard before. Yeah, I promised, didn't I? That night after she fell asleep, I found him in the study again. Same room, same dim light, same stillness. Only this time he looked human, tired, unguarded. Where were you? I asked. He didn't look at me, cleaning up a mess I should have handled long ago. Whose mess? Mine. He poured a drink but didn't touch it. There was a man in my circle, one I treated like family. He's the one who came after you. He's the one who killed Tyler. The words hit like ice. So it's over? He nodded slowly. He won't touch you again. He won't touch anyone. There was no pride in his tone, just exhaustion. I sank into the chair across from him. You killed him. He didn't deny it. I ended it. I wanted to be angry, to recoil from the man who could take a life so easily. But all I felt was an ache that had no name. Do you regret it? I asked. His eyes lifted to mine. Every day. But regret doesn't bring peace. It just reminds you you're still bleeding. Something in his voice cracked the wall I'd built around myself. Luca, I whispered, what do you want from me now? He stared at me for a long time before answering. I want you to stop surviving and start living. I want you and the girl to have what I can't. And what's that? A normal life. I almost laughed. You think that's possible now? He looked at me then, really looked. If you want it to be. He stood, setting his untouched glass down. There's money in your account. Enough to start over anywhere you choose. A house, a car, security. You don't owe me anything. It felt like someone had pulled the ground out from under me. You're sending us away. He didn't answer. You think I can just erase everything that happened? I said, my voice rising. Pretend you didn't save us? Pretend I didn't... I stopped myself, the words burning on my tongue. He stepped closer, his voice low. Didn't what? I couldn't lie. Didn't fall for you. His breath caught. For a moment, the world went quiet. Then he reached up, brushing a strand of hair from my face. Lena, I'm poison. You know that. Then let me decide if I want to drink. He smiled, sad and slow. You already did. He kissed me then. Gentle. Final. The kind of kiss that says everything words can't. I wanted to hate him for it, but I couldn't. By morning, he was gone again. This time, no guards, no goodbye, no warning. Just silence. Days passed. Then weeks. I started to believe that maybe he'd meant for it to end this way. That maybe love, for men like Luca Moretti, was just another debt they paid in distance. I sold the house. Moved Emma and myself to a small coastal town where nobody knew our names. I found work at a bakery. The smell of sugar and bread filled the days. It wasn't perfect, but it was peace. Emma started school. She laughed more. I began to sleep again. Slowly, I started feeling like myself, whoever that was now. Sometimes at night, I'd stand on the balcony and watch the sea. I'd think of him. The way his voice could calm a room, the way his presence filled it. I told myself he was just a memory, a lesson, a scar that had learned how to breathe, until the day he showed up again. It was raining somewhere in the distance, but here the sun was bright and clean. I was wiping down the counter when I saw him through the glass window, standing across the street, black shirt, sleeves rolled, that same undone collar. He didn't move, Just watched me. I froze. The noise of the cafe faded. My hands trembled. When he finally stepped inside, every sound in the world seemed to go still. "Luca," I breathed. He looked older, wearier, but alive. His eyes found mine and held there. "I didn't come to take you back," he said quietly. "I came to see if you were happy." I couldn't speak. He smiled faintly. "You are." "I can see it." My throat burned. "Why are you here?" "To tell you I kept my promise." He reached into his pocket, set a small envelope on the counter. "This is the last of it. The account's closed. You're free now. No one's looking for you. It's over." I stared at him. "And you?" He shrugged lightly. "Men like me don't get endings. Just pauses." Before I could stop myself, I stepped around the counter and wrapped my arms around him. For a second, he didn't move. Then his hand came up to my back, holding me the way a drowning man might hold the surface. "Thank you," I whispered. He pulled back just enough to look at me. "Don't thank me, Lena, just live." Then he was gone again, just as quietly as he came. That night, after I put Emma to bed, I sat on the balcony, watching the horizon. The sea glowed with the last light of the day. I thought about all the things I'd lost and all the things I'd found in their place. Luca was right. We don't get perfect endings. We get survival. We get love that leaves marks instead of promises. We get a chance to rebuild, even if the foundation still remembers the fire. I looked up at the stars, their light steady and indifferent, and I spoke aloud, like he could somehow hear me. "I kept my promise too. I didn't leave you. Not really." The wind carried the words away, and for the first time I didn't chase them. Because this was what healing looked like. Not forgetting, but learning how to live with the echo. I had lost everything in one night, but somehow, in the wreckage, a man who shouldn't have cared gave me the tools to rebuild. Not by saving me, but by teaching me what survival really means. And maybe, somewhere out there, in whatever darkness he chose to walk into, that was enough for him too. Love didn't rescue her. It remade her. The past still echoes, but she stands unbroken, alive, awake, and finally free. If this story found you when you needed strength most, let it stay with you. Subscribe for more dark, confessional love stories told by voices that remember what it costs to survive. A new story every day. Listen, feel, remember.
The music thumped like a frantic heartbeat, a sound so loud Ariana could feel it vibrating in her bones. The grand ballroom was a swirling sea of silk, diamonds, and fake laughter. Everyone was there, but no one was really there to have fun. They were there to be seen, to gain favor, to show loyalty to the most powerful and feared man in the city, Gavino. Ariana, a guest of a friend who'd begged her for moral support, felt like a small, plain bird trapped in a cage of glittering peacocks. She stood by a towering ice sculpture, her simple blue dress a quiet island in the noisy room. Her eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the crowd not for important people, but for an escape from the overwhelming pressure. That's when she saw him. In a shadowy corner, far from the orchestra and the chattering clusters of people, a young man was sitting on the floor. He wasn't slumped in defeat or drunkenness. He was focused, intensely so. He had a small, velvet pouch, and from it he was carefully placing smooth, shiny stones onto the polished marble floor, arranging them in a complex, spiraling pattern. The light from a nearby sconce caught the flecks of gold in the stones, making them gleam like tiny, captured stars. This was Kai, the boss's son. Ariana had heard the whispers. Strange. Unreachable. A ghost in his own house. People were scared of his father, a man with a gaze like cold steel, and so they were scared of Kai, too. They didn't know how to talk to him, so they chose not to. As she watched, a woman in a towering feathered headdress swept past Kai, her gown swishing just inches from his carefully laid stones. She didn't even glance down. Another man, laughing loudly with a glass of champagne, pointed subtly in Kai's direction and muttered something to his companion, who shook his head with a pitying smirk. They saw him as a piece of furniture, a problem, a puzzle not worth solving. A deep, hot anger began to simmer in Ariana's chest. It was so profoundly wrong. Without a second thought, a plan forming not in her head but in her heart, she began to move. Weaving through the crowd, she ignored the curious glances. She felt the weight of Gavino's presence from across the room, a silent, watchful mountain of a man, but she didn't look his way. Her entire world had narrowed to that quiet corner and the lonely figure on the floor. She reached the edge of the noisy part of the room, and the sounds faded into a dull roar. She didn't announce herself. She didn't ask if she could join him. She simply walked over, her movements slow and deliberate, and then, gathering the fabric of her dress, she sank to the floor. She sat a respectful few feet away, close enough to be present, but far enough to not crowd him or threaten his space. The cold marble seeped through her dress, a shocking contrast to the stuffy air. Kai's hands, which had been placing a piece of obsidian, stilled. His shoulders tensed. He didn't look up, but Ariana could see the rapid flutter of a pulse in his neck. He was aware of her, a new variable in his controlled environment. She said nothing. She just sat, folding her hands in her lap, and looked at his stone spiral. It was beautiful, a silent language of order and beauty in a chaotic world. She focused on her breathing, keeping it calm and even, hoping he would sense she was not a threat. A long minute passed. The party continued to swirl behind them, a world away. Then slowly his head turned. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, met hers. They were not empty, as the whispers said. They were deep, intelligent, and filled with a wariness that made her heart ache. He looked directly at her, a quick, assessing glance, then his gaze dropped to the stones. He picked up a stone, a piece of milky quartz, and held it out in her direction, not looking at her, his attention fixed on the spiral. It wasn't an offer, not quite. It was a test. Ariana's breath hitched. This was the moment. If she moved too fast, spoke too loudly, took the stone the wrong way, the fragile connection would shatter. She leaned forward, just a little, and gently, so gently, plucked the quartz from his open palm. Her fingertips barely brushed his skin, but the contact sent a tiny, electric spark up her arm. It was the briefest touch, but it felt more intimate than any dance in the crowded room. She held the cool, smooth stone, looking at it as if it were a great treasure. Then she looked at the spiral, at the space where he seemed to be guiding her. Carefully, she reached out and placed the quartz in a gap in the pattern. It fit perfectly. Kai let out a breath she didn't realize he'd been holding. His posture relaxed a fraction. He selected another stone, a deep red jasper, and placed it next to her quartz. Then he looked at her again, and this time, his gaze held for a second longer. "The noise is a physical weight," he said, his voice low and quiet but clear. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, a raw piece of truth offered to her. Ariana nodded, understanding completely. "It feels like sandpaper on my skin," she replied softly, matching his quiet tone. The flicker of something, surprise, recognition, crossed his face. He gave a single, sharp nod. He reached into his pouch and pulled out another stone, this one a shimmering piece of labradorite, its colors shifting from blue to green in the light. He didn't hand it to her this time. Instead, he placed it directly in front of her, an invitation to continue. They fell into a rhythm, a silent, shared purpose. He would choose a stone, she would place one. They were building something together, a tiny fortress of calm against the storm of the party. Ariana forgot about the feathered ladies and the laughing men. She forgot about the powerful boss. There was only the cool marble, the beautiful stones, and the quiet, fascinating man beside her. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them. The music seemed to stutter. Ariana looked up, her heart leaping into her throat. Gavino stood over them, his immense frame blocking the light. His face was an unreadable mask, his eyes, so like his son's but infinitely colder, scanned the scene. His son on the floor, a strange young woman beside him, and the intricate stone spiral they had built together. The air grew thick and heavy. Kai's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. He stared rigidly at the stones, his brief moment of peace shattered. The boss's gaze, which had seen violence and commanded fear, finally settled on Ariana. He looked from her face, to her simple blue dress, to the way she was sitting so naturally on his palace floor. The silence stretched, taut and dangerous. Ariana's blood ran cold. What had she done? Had she broken an unspoken rule? Had she offended the most dangerous man in the city? Then, the boss did something utterly unexpected. He slowly, deliberately, lowered himself onto one knee. The expensive fabric of his suit strained. He was so close Ariana could smell his expensive cologne. He didn't look at her. He looked at his son, and then at the stone spiral. He reached out a large, heavy hand, and for a terrifying second, Ariana thought he was going to sweep their beautiful creation away. Instead, his thick fingers hovered over the stones. He picked up a single, black onyx that Kai had placed at the spiral's very center. He held it up, the black stone looking small and dark in his powerful palm. He turned his head, and his stormy eyes locked directly with Ariana's. The intensity in his gaze was overwhelming, a silent demand for an answer. In a voice like grinding gravel, low and meant only for them, he spoke a single, loaded question that hung in the air between them, a cliffhanger that would decide everything. "Who?" he asked, his eyes boring into hers. "Are you?" The silence after the boss's question was heavier than any noise the party could produce. Ariana's mouth felt dry. She looked from the boss's intense, unreadable face to Kai, who had gone perfectly still, his shoulders hunched as if waiting for a blow. "My name is Ariana," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. She did not look away from the boss. "I was admiring the stones." The boss's eyes narrowed, studying her. He glanced at his son, then back at the spiral on the floor. He closed his large hand around the onyx, and for a heart-stopping moment, Ariana was sure he would crush it. Instead, he stood up, his joints cracking in the sudden quiet. He looked down at Kai. "The girl may visit tomorrow," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Then he turned and walked away, melting back into the crowd, the black onyx still clutched in his fist. The next day, Ariana arrived at the imposing iron gates of the mansion, her heart thumping a wild rhythm against her ribs. She half expected to be turned away. But the gates swung open, and a silent, serious man led her not to the grand ballroom, but to a sun-drenched conservatory filled with strange, fragrant plants. Kai was there, sitting on a stone bench, a thick book about constellations open on his lap. He looked up as she entered, his stormy eyes wide with what she hoped was surprise, not alarm. "You came back," he stated, as if confirming a fascinating but unlikely fact. "I said I would," she replied softly. That was the beginning of their secret world. Ariana visited almost every day. At first, they simply existed in the same quiet spaces. She would find him in the library, organizing books by the color of their spines, and she would sit and read her own novel, the only sound the soft rustle of turning pages. She learned that his silence was not empty, it was full of deep, swirling thoughts. Then, one afternoon in the garden, he began to talk. He pointed to the first evening star twinkling in the lavender sky. "That's Venus," he said. "It's not a star at all. It's a planet, covered in thick, poisonous clouds, with a surface hot enough to melt lead." Ariana listened, enchanted. "It's beautiful, even if it's dangerous." Kai looked at her, a slight frown on his face. That is an illogical but pleasant way to see it. He spoke to her in a way no one else ever had, with absolute, blunt honesty. He didn't use flattery or hidden meanings. When she asked him a question, he gave her the complete, detailed truth. It was like a cool, clear drink of water after a lifetime of sipping mud. He taught her about the violent storms on Jupiter, the diamond rains on Neptune, and the theory that our universe might be one of many, like bubbles in a vast sea. Their world was built in these hidden corners of the estate, far from the armed guards and the tense, whispered conversations about territory and debts. They were in the garden watching bees drone from flower to flower, in his quiet room where the walls were painted a deep, calming blue, on the flat roof of a forgotten turret where the city lights below looked like a reflection of the stars above. Their friendship was a slow, sweet bloom. It grew in the shared silence and the shared facts. The first time their hands touched was over a star chart. Ariana was tracing the line of Orion's belt with her finger, and Kai's hand was resting beside hers. As she moved, her pinky finger brushed against his. A jolt, warm and electric, passed between them. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. Slowly, carefully, he turned his hand and laced his fingers through hers. His palm was warm, his grip firm and certain. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, the map of the heavens spread out before them, a silent promise passing between their linked hands. The real shift happened on a rainy afternoon. They were in the library, and a sudden, fierce gust of wind rattled the window panes, blowing a loose strand of hair across Ariana's face. She went to brush it away, but Kai's hand moved first. He stopped, his fingers hovering just inches from her cheek. He was watching the strand of hair as if it were a complex equation. His breathing was shallow. Ariana held perfectly still, her own heart hammering. Touch was difficult for him, something he usually controlled with great effort. For him to initiate it was a monumental act. Hesitantly, his fingers moved forward. They were trembling slightly. With a touch as light as a butterfly's wing, he gently hooked the stray strand of her golden hair and tucked it behind her ear. His fingertips grazed the sensitive skin of her temple and the curve of her ear, and the contact was so intensely intimate it stole her breath. It was a whisper of a touch, but it screamed of feeling. He pulled his hand back, his eyes wide, as if surprised by his own bravery. He looked directly into her eyes, his gaze open and vulnerable. "Your hair," he said, his voice low and rough with emotion. "It is like captured sunlight." The air in the room grew thick and warm. The simple, honest words, combined with the daring of his touch, created a spark that seemed to ignite between them. This was their version of spicy, not a roaring fire, but a slow, deep, smoldering heat built on trust and a profound understanding. It was more intense than any dramatic kiss could have been. In that moment, they were the only two people in the world. Ariana reached out and, mirroring his courage, placed her hand over his where it rested on the table. "Thank you, Kai," she whispered. From the doorway, unseen by either of them, Gavino watched. He had come to check on his son, a daily ritual. He saw the way Kai was looking at Ariana, not with his usual guarded distance, but with a soft, open warmth the boss had never seen before. He saw the confidence in his son's posture, the ease with which he had reached out. He saw the way the girl, Ariana, didn't flinch or demand, but simply accepted the gesture for the treasure it was. The boss was a hard man. His life was built on violence, suspicion, and power. He had never known a love like the one unfolding quietly in his library. He saw that this young woman did not look at his son and see a problem, or a weapon, or a key to his fortune. She looked at Kai and saw Kai. She saw the stars in his eyes and the quiet universe in his mind. He didn't step into the room. He didn't say a word. He simply watched for a moment longer, a strange, unfamiliar feeling stirring in his chest. It was a feeling of peace, of rightness. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod, then turned and walked away, leaving them in their secret world. He had given his silent, but absolute, approval. The peace of their secret world was as fragile as a glass star. The real world, with its violence and rivalries, was always just outside the garden wall. The Mancini family, hungry for more power, saw the boss's softened focus, his quiet approval of the girl who made his son smile, as a weakness. And they decided to strike at what they thought was the easiest target, the broken son. It happened on one of their walks. Ariana and Kai were following a familiar path through a secluded part of the estate's gardens, Kai explaining how the phases of the moon worked, his hands moving in precise arcs through the air. Suddenly, 3 men dressed in dark clothes stepped from behind the tall hedges, blocking their way. They were Mancini men, their faces hard and their intentions clear. "Well, well," the leader sneered, his eyes locked on Kai. "The little prince taking a stroll. Your father needs to be reminded of his place. A little scare should do it." Kai froze. The sudden confrontation, the aggressive tones, the invasion of his safe space. It was a sensory assault. He took a sharp step back, his hands coming up to press against his ears, his eyes squeezing shut. He was retreating, disappearing into the safety of his own mind. The men laughed, a cruel, grating sound. "See? Useless." But they had not accounted for Ariana. A fierce, protective fury, cold and sharp, flashed through her. She didn't scream or cry. In one fluid, determined motion, she stepped directly in front of Kai, placing her body between him and the danger. She spread her arms wide, a human shield in a simple summer dress. "You will not touch him," she said, her voice low and steady, though her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. She looked the leader directly in the eye, her gaze unwavering. "You want to get to his father? You go through me first." The men were taken aback. This was not in their plan. The leader recovered, smirking. "And what are you going to do, little girl?" "I am the one who sees him," she fired back, her voice gaining strength. "And I am telling you to get off this property. Now." In that moment, she was not just kind Ariana. She was a force. Her love for Kai was not a quiet, gentle thing. It was a shield, a sword, a roaring fire. He was not a burden. He was her reason to find a courage she never knew she possessed. Behind her, a change was happening. Kai, hearing Ariana's strong, clear voice cutting through his panic, slowly lowered his hands. He opened his eyes. He saw the straight line of her back, the way she held herself between him and the world. She was protecting him. And a new, powerful feeling surged through him, the need to protect her. His mind, which often struggled with the chaos of people, was a master of details. While the men were focused on Ariana, his eyes, sharp and observant, were cataloging everything. The chipped tooth on the leader when he smirked. The distinct, snakehead tattoo peeking from under the second man's collar. The license plate of the black car idling just beyond the gate, which he had memorized in a single glance when they first arrived. "The car," Kai said, his voice quiet but cutting through the tension. Everyone turned to look at him. He was no longer cowering. He was focused, his gaze intense. "License plate 74J, XB8. The man on the left has a tattoo of a viper on his neck, partially obscured. The one speaking has a damaged canine tooth on the right side. They are the same men who followed my father's shipment last Thursday at the West Side docks. They are using a Mancini-owned warehouse on Harbor Drive, Unit 12. The one with the green door." The men stared, their smug confidence dissolving into stunned silence. The leader's face went pale. This was not the helpless boy they had been told about. This was a living, breathing surveillance system. Before they could react, the sound of shouting and running feet echoed through the garden. The boss's security, alerted by the disturbance, swarmed the path, quickly surrounding and disarming the intruders. The boss himself arrived, his face a thundercloud. He listened as his head guard relayed the information Kai had just recited. He looked at his son, who was now standing tall beside Ariana, their hands clasped tightly together. He saw the fierce protectiveness in Ariana's eyes and the sharp, powerful intelligence in his son's. In that moment, the boss saw them not as a quiet boy and his gentle friend, but as a partnership, the team. He saw Kai's unique mind for what it truly was, a formidable strength. He gave a grim, approving nod to Kai, a look of pure, unvarnished respect. Then his men dragged the Mancini thugs away. The threat was over. Weeks later, under a canopy of 1,000,000 twinkling stars, their forever began. There was no big church, no crowd of strangers. It was just them, in the very garden where they had faced danger and found their strength. Gavino stood as a quiet witness, a rare softness in his eyes. Kai, dressed in a simple, comfortable suit, held Ariana's hands. He didn't need a priest or a long speech. His own words were the truest vow he could ever give. He looked into her eyes, his stormy gaze clear and full of love. "You are my favorite person," he said, his voice strong and sure. "My world began when you sat on the floor." Tears of pure joy streamed down Ariana's face. She squeezed his hands. "And I will be your safe place," she promised, her voice a soft whisper that held the strength of a vow. "You're quiet in the noise. You're forever." As they sealed their promise with a kiss, gentle and full of a love that had conquered fear and silence, the stars above seemed to shine just for them. Their love story, which started with a simple, kind act on a cold marble floor, had become their unshakable, beautiful forever. This story of quiet courage and fierce love proves that the strongest bonds are often forged in the softest moments. If this journey of Ariana and Kai touched your heart, then subscribe to the channel. We have many more tales of unique love and unexpected heroes waiting for you. A single click lets you know that stories like this matter. We would love to hear from you, our wonderful audience. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Are you in bustling Mumbai, a quiet town in Canada, or under the sunny skies of Brazil? Share your thoughts about the story. Did Ariana's bravery inspire you? Did Kai's quiet strength resonate with you? Let's build our own community, right here, united by a love of stories that celebrate seeing the real person inside. We read every single comment.